every single one of these entrepreneurs had a passion outside of school. And in every case, their parents supported that passion. And in 90% of the cases, the parents knew nothing about the passion. And in 50% of the cases, the parents were like slightly freaked out about the passion in the beginning. But in every case, when the parents realized how much their kids loved it and how much joy they got from it, they were like, great, we're happy to see you doing something you love.
Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast. After 120 plus episodes, we're doing something different this season. I'm still your host, Paul Sullivan, and we're still focused on lead dads, working moms, and how small changes at home or at work can have a big impact on their lives. What's new is each episode now promises to deliver actionable advice on some area of concern at home or at work. Short, direct, again, actionable. 5 questions, 5 answers. This week, our guest is Margot Machol Bisnow, author of Raising an Entrepreneur, How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams, 99 stories from families who did. But she's not here to talk about what they did right. You can read the book for that. But what some of these parents wished that they had done. Some of them, she found, had 4 regrets in raising their children. We'll get to that much later because there's so much to talk about before that question. So welcome, Margot, to the Company of Dads podcast.
Thank you.
All right, question 1. Your dad was a systems engineer. You spent 20 years working in government, rising to the highest levels at the Federal Trade Commission in the White House. You've been married for 40 years to Mark Bisnow, an entrepreneur. You have 2 sons. One is an entrepreneur. The other is the front man of a band, which is surely as entrepreneurial as it is artistic. Did you set out to raise entrepreneurial children, or what was it that drove you and your husband when you were raising these boys?
So we barely knew what being an entrepreneur was. It wasn't on our radar. We had no intention of it. And my husband didn't start his company until the kids were, out of school. So it's not something we grew up talking about. We were just super into politics. In fact, when my older son, Elliot, started his organization, Summit, which is Conferences of Young Entrepreneurs, he didn't want to start a conference series. That wasn't his idea. He just wanted to find out, how do you become an entrepreneur? And how did you do it? And so he cold called 18 young entrepreneurs under the age of 30 and invited them for a ski weekend in Utah because he figured he wasn't cool enough for them to talk to him otherwise.
Was he a really good skier?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Anyhow, it turned out, this was 2008, and none of these people had ever met anyone like themselves before, and they all became best friends, and they all said, you have to do this again, and I want to bring 5 friends. But he did it because we didn't know entrepreneurs, and we hadn't talked about entrepreneurship.
So should the first question have been something more along the lines of how did your kids grow up in this very political household and none of them became politicians or worked in politics?
So this is something else that I didn't think about until I'd written the book and started talking to parents. Both of our kids had these serious, intense passions from age 13 on that they were both doing 5 hours a day, 7 days a week. Elliot, our oldest son, was playing tennis. Austin, our younger son, was writing music. Austin wrote 300 songs before he graduated from high school. Elliot fought his way up from, not ever having played at 12 to 35 in the country. They were both super intense about this. And we don't know anything about music, and we don't know anything about tennis. And I would go to these tennis tournaments for the top 100 kids in the country. I'd be the only parent there who didn't know the rules. And it's only thinking back about it, looking back, that I realized this was incredible because they had to figure it out for themselves. they both had to, I'm such a helpful person. If it had been something I'd known anything about, I'd
Right.
been all over them with suggestions and ideas and helpful hints and let me introduce you to this person or this. I couldn't do that. They had to figure everything out for themselves. And doing that is how they became who they are. It's how they became entrepreneurial.
It's so fascinating because I mean, you worked in the Reagan and Bush administrations. At some point, a certain parent might have said, "Hey, this music thing, it's pretty good, and hey, tennis, everybody likes tennis, good exercise, good for you. How about you come and meet, President Bush, and we talk about what you can do." What allowed you and your husband as parents to not interfere, as it were, and to let these young boys just pursue their passions? They're both very successful today, but what said, okay, well, what was it? Were you saying, well, politics is my passion, and I'm glad I have it, but my boys have a different passion, and I'm going to let them run with it.
Yeah.
That's great. No, I mean, you say that as if it's the most normal thing in the world, but I'm calling you from Fairfield County, Connecticut, where it's the land of parents who want to over-engineer the lives of their children, and it sounds like you were quite the opposite. That you were fortunate to have kids who were deeply passionate about something, and then you just facilitated that. You sort of gave them the opportunity to continue to run with it.
But the cool thing, Paul, is that basically that was the story of everyone I interviewed.
Mm,
Every single one of these entrepreneurs had a passion outside of school. And in every case, their parents supported that passion. And in 90% of the cases, the parents knew nothing about the passion. And in 50% of the cases, the parents were like slightly freaked out about the passion in the beginning.
right.
But in every case, when the parents realized how much their kids loved it and how much joy they got from it, they were like, great, we're happy to see you doing something you love. And I think about a third of them, their passion was sports.
Mm,
And none of them became professional athletes.
right. But
So,
they learned how to win and lose. They learned how to practice. They learned how to be intensely focused on something.
right. And my son, my older son, was actually honored by the tennis center where he trained, the first of their kids who was honored for what he did off the court. And he said, everything I am today is because of tennis. He said, I didn't really like school. I didn't work that hard at school. Tennis is where I learned grit and focus and determination and hard work and, the trade-off between failure and results and learning how to lose and learning how to pivot and all the kinds of grit and all the things you need if you're going to be successful in life. And eventually, I mean, I can give you example after example in the book. And some of these parents, it was like a big gulp. And eventually they were just like, we love that you found something that gives you joy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Question two, listening to this, I'm almost, I love your response, but it almost scares me because I can imagine some, tiger parents being like, okay, well, it's time for you to find your passion. You're 13 now and you don't have your passion, which of course, exactly how it doesn't work. You find a passion because you're passionate about it. When you, think about parents, and as you said, you and your husband didn't even have this sense of the word entrepreneur back then. You were doing your own thing. Your kids were doing your own thing. But that's not the case today. I mean, yeah, there are young entrepreneur camps. Certain parents think, oh, I want my kid to be an entrepreneur. But when you look at, sort of outcomes and successful outcomes, should parents, focus more on kids being entrepreneurial or being entrepreneurs one day?
Neither.
Neither. Being a better
Right.
answer. Tell me.
You can't send an uncurious kid to entrepreneur camp and think they're going to become an entrepreneur. You can't say, I want you to become an entrepreneur. And so here's this project that I've decided we can do together and we're going to build together and I'm going to show you how to sell it. No, no, no. And,
all these camp directors of like entrepreneur camps are like, oh no, what is this woman saying? Like, you're just destroying our business model.
and you can't, you know, I mean, I think you shouldn't worry if your kid is 10 or 11 and hasn't found their passion. And you shouldn't worry whatever their passion is if it changes over time. So many of these people had one passion at 10 and a different passion at 13 and a different passion at 15. That's okay too. And very few of these people ended up with their passion being what they do in life. I mean, for most of them, their passion was just how they learned, grit and resilience and stuff. So I would say the important thing for parents is don't have your kids so overprogrammed with things you think will help them get into the right school. Let your kids explore, let your kids play, let your kids try different things, let your kids try something else if they don't like what they tried, and see if there's anything that they are doing that seems to put a spark in their eyes. And if there is, like, let them do it a little more and encourage it and tell them how proud you are for their success in that, even if they, are getting a C in trigonometry. I mean, Paul, do you actually need trigonometry?
No, I think that it's a simple no is the answer there. No.
So I think it's really important. I mean, I think that, and this is kind of what you're asking, the path that worked for us, it may work for some kids today. It doesn't work for everybody, and it's no longer necessary. You no longer, I mean, I went to a great school. My husband went to a great school. We both got advanced degrees at great schools. That's great. It worked for us back then. It works for some kids. You may have a kid who just wants to study all the time and wants to go be a doctor, and that's great. But it doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't have to work. There's a different path, and parents have to recognize this, and they have to let their kids go and explore and find what gives them joy and do the thing they love and see if they can make something out of that.
So, are you telling me that I should save the $17,000 and not send my 7-year-old to the entrepreneur camp in the Everest mountain range this summer? Kidding.
Okay.
Kidding. We have this question 3. That's an excellent question. 3. There is sort of this stereotypical image of an entrepreneur as is totally focused, locked in on what he or she is doing, not really considering, the consequences. A couple of entrepreneurs are out there today, really fit this mold. But when you're trying to, raise that child to have a passion, to be entrepreneurial, to do what he or she wants to do, does compassion come into this at all?
Compassion is super important. I'm so happy you asked me that. Most people who don't know entrepreneurs think people become entrepreneurs to make money. If you want to make money, you go to Wall Street. People who become entrepreneurs, in my experience, do this because they've been raised with compassion and they've been raised to say, how can I make the world a better place? What can I do to improve people's lives? And sometimes that's making more comfortable clothing. And sometimes that's making a healthier drink. And sometimes that's making something else. But it's always something that they think is going to improve people's lives or make things better. And I mean, I think you don't do that if you're raised only to look out for yourself and not to consider the effect of things on other people.
I love that answer because implicit in it is there needs to be that curiosity about others. Like if you want to be myopically focused on one thing, you could go, work for a hedge fund. You could go work in Wall Street. You still need to have great intellect. But as you're saying, like if you decide you're going to make more comfortable clothes for people, you have to have that innate curiosity that's, that made you realize that perhaps the clothes that person is wearing are uncomfortable.
So, Paul, I would say that you're like listing all the things you need to become a good entrepreneur. One would be compassion, and one would be curiosity.
Yep.
And I would actually think of them as separate things that parents can encourage in their children. So I think you encourage curiosity by having dinner table conversations and say, what happened to you today? Is that the best way you could have handled it? Do you think you could have done it differently? Why would you have done it differently? What would have happened if you had done it differently? And start getting them to be curious and to think about things. And compassion is like, does it have to be that way? Could you help that person? Could you make it better for that person? I mean, they're related, but they're not identical.
Yeah, I love that. At one of my daughter's schools, they talk about people not being bystanders, but being upstanders.
Oh,
So
I
when
love
they,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
when they see something, they help out. All right. Question 4, the 4 regrets. What are the 4 regrets that parents who have raised successful entrepreneurs have, or many of them have?
Right. So I wouldn't say every parent had all 4 regrets. I would say that these are some of the regrets I heard from, from some of the
Top
parents.
4, top 4 regrets. Then is that fair?
Okay. I'm trying to remember what I said. Um, One of them was that they fixed things for their kids.
Mhm.
This would be me. Looking back, that
Really?
was, yeah, I was always trying to fix things way more than I should have, and ease the path. I mean, I wasn't as bad as some parents. Some
Yeah.
parents were a lot worse, but I wish I had done it even less. I think it's really important for kids to fix things for themselves, to get the confidence that they know they can fix things themselves, to get the confidence they know they can recover from failure.
Yeah. So this
Um,
is, they call it the, so-called snowplow parent who sort of,
yeah, we're always
drives it. Yeah. Yeah.
making things out, pushing things out of the way. Um, Another regret was that just too big an emphasis on grades and getting into the right school.
Mhm.
Um, And, a third of the entrepreneurs I interviewed were great students and breezed through Ivies and got advanced degrees. And, a third of them dropped out of college, and another big group didn't even go to college. And a lot of them who stayed in college were miserable.
Mhm.
And I just think a lot of parents kind of look around now and they're like, why am I forcing you to stay there when it's A, expensive, and B, you're unhappy, and C, you're not learning anything? Um, so I just think, so many of us, that's how we grew up, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to go to a good college and you have to graduate because otherwise you won't be able to succeed in life. And you won't be able to succeed if you want to go to Wall Street, but
Yeah.
you'll definitely be able to succeed if you want to go to a startup or even start your own.
I think that's interesting though, because you interviewed parents of, you know, entrepreneurs who were successful. And of course, there is a bit of confirmation bias in there. You come from the world of economics, and the confirmation bias being, well, you're talking to people who had success. I wonder what they would have said had you, the subtitle been, interviews with 99 families whose children thought they were going to be entrepreneurs but failed miserably and are now living in some form of abject poverty. I mean, there is a flip side to this. Like you pick the ones that were successful, and I wonder if there is a separate group who might have said, you know what, I might have had a happier life if I finished college and got a decent job and just went on with things.
I mean, then they can go back to college.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, no decision is forever.
Yeah.
So, um, and also I would say like, so suppose they try to start a company and it doesn't work out. Okay, then they can try to join a startup. And they can say, I tried to start something in this area and it didn't work. And I feel like I really need to work with a company that succeeded in this area and learn more about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that startup might be just as intrigued by that person as if they'd stayed in college and graduated with C's and not been excited
Not
about
be
it.
engaged. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. All right, I'm not going to hold you to all 4, but do any others come to mind of sort of the regrets that these parents had around things that they did, but in retrospect realized they probably didn't need to do to raise these kids successfully?
Well, or just that they could have done better at, they could have done better at, um, when their kids failed.
Mhm.
Um,
And better in what sense of not being sort of angry when they came home with that C, or better at understanding why they perhaps were disengaged in that class and got to see, like, what does better mean?
yeah, or just, I think they were probably better than almost every other parent in terms of not punishing their kids for failure, not scolding their kids if they screwed up, asking them what they learned, but they all felt they could have been even better.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't get on the team. What do you think you learned from that?
Hmm.
What would
Yeah.
you do differently?
Yeah.
Not, oh God, you didn't get on the team. Do you know what I mean? It's
If you are not the number one squash player in America in the sixth grade, what's the point? Like, where are you going to go from here? I love it. Question 5, Margot. Question 5, ending on a positive note. What's the most important thing for a parent to do if he or she wants to raise someone who is creative, confident, happy, and successful?
it's basically what we've been talking about. Watch your child, see what gives them joy, encourage them to pursue it, tell them how proud you are of their success in that, and tell them you're there for them, and tell them that there will be ups and downs and there will be setbacks, and that failure is how they will learn and grow, and your family will always be there for them when things don't work out, and that you love them, and that they'll get there eventually. And all the entrepreneurs told me like how much it meant to them when their parents said stuff like that to them. I mean, John Chu, who just directed Wicked,
Mm-hmm.
said that his parents always told him, if things didn't work out, he could move home for a while. He said, that gave me the courage to take risks. I never had to move home, but knowing that enabled me to take risks when I was younger. And they all told me stories like this, that having their parents' support and knowing that their family was there for them and had their back meant so much.
I love it. This has been fantastic. Pick up the book, Raising an Entrepreneur, How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams. 99 stories from families who did. Margot, thank you so much for being my guest today on the Company of Dads podcast.
Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Company of Dads podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in week after week. Just want to use this moment here to thank the people who make it possible. Number one, of course, Helder Mira, who is our podcast editor. We also have Skip Cherryholmes, who many of you know from the Lead Dad Diaries. He's taken over our social media. Terry Brennan is helping us with our audience development, and Emily Servin is there each and every day helping with the web development. I can't do any of this without an amazing board of advisors. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who help, and I want to say thank you to everyone who listens, and hopefully you'll tune in again next week. Thanks so much.